Right. Can you all see those three pools of colour?
Yeah.
I mean, this was just is just Prussian blue. This is just alizarin crimson, and this is actually aureolin with some gamboge. So it's not just the original aureolin that we used last week. I just felt that maybe the yellow needed to be warmer, and that was the result of my painting. But you know, we'll hand over and see what Prue suggests in a minute. Prue, what do you think about those three colours?
Well, I only used what I had, which was the Prussian blue, the alizarin, and, well, actually, to be honest, it was aureolin plus something, when I don't know what it was. It was already on my palette, but like you, it was a slightly less lemony.
Yes. Yellow. So it's heading more towards a kind of cadmium yellow, if you've got that, or if you have got gamboge, then gamboge. It's just slightly warmer than the aureolin.
Yeah.
And then I suggest that we all of us try out our colours on our test, a piece of test paper, so we can see what they look like against the painting. Obviously you can't. There's no straightforward yellow in the painting, so you won't be able to check that, but you certainly can check the pink and the blue. When you've done that and you've got your three squares of colour on your paper so you can see them, those are the three colours I use right the way throughout the one that I did yesterday. But I'm going to ask Prue to talk to us about how she approached hers, because she sent me in hers, and hers looks closer to my original than my own did. So we're going to work together on this, because I think it's a case of pooling our knowledge at this. Is everybody nearly at a point where they've mixed those three colours?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so would you like to just put your brushes down for a minute and let's have a look at the screen. Now, on the left is my printout, and on the right is Prue's finished painting. And I think that she has got certainly that bottom right hand rectangle. I think the colours are pretty close to what he's got. I think that she's also got the depth of the colours well, you know, the darkness of these greeny blues that he has at the top. I think that this isn't quite right, these three here. And I think that the colours are getting a little lost in this, but I think what I was struck by was how the colours are rich and strong on in the outer registers of this painting, and that is very successful. Now I'm going to show you, we'll talk about this in a minute. Mine is printed out really, well, photographed really badly, so it looks really brown here. Certainly looks very brown against Prue's, and the colours look completely wrong. When I have it on the table in front of me here next to the original, it doesn't look half as bad. So I'll show you, it may be just a bad photograph, I don't know, but certainly not correct. Then I did it against Klee's on the screen, and it still doesn't look right. So I think my yellow is not strong enough, so it's not operating with the the red correctly. And I think basically I've gone on too many layers, and it's killed it. That's what it looks like here. But anyway, I might be wrong. This was Sally's that she sent in. I think this is lovely, even though the colours aren't strong enough. I think that there's some beautiful subtle colours here. Now, these are what Prue sent in with hers. She recorded every stage, and I thought that was, you know, really intelligent. And I did the same, but she's got hers out of 8 and I've got mine out of 12. And I really, you know, I'm in Egypt, and it has a lovely feeling of warmth and the Mediterranean. And I do know how it's done. He did do blocks of colour, and then he did other little colours on top of the colours underneath, like
oil. Is it an oil?
But it's no. Yes, it may well be an oil, this one. So yeah, it's oil. So it's different to our watercolour, and I wouldn't even begin to try doing it in watercolour, but I just thought it was a lovely painting. And then before I hand over to Prue, it was Mondrian that I was trying to talk to you about last week. Both Mondrian, Kandinsky and Klee all taught at the Bauhaus, and you can see the sort of move towards abstraction with all three of them. And I just thought that was interesting. Now I'm going to come out of sharing, and I'm going to come out of, oh yes, you see, this is my one here. Like, this is the fit one that I was showing you on the screen. It doesn't look as bad here as it does in the PowerPoint, but it's still not right. So I'm going to surrender it. However, if you haven't got tracing paper, which I know somebody in the group hasn't, there is, you know, the way we did it, there was nothing wrong about it other than the fact that it's quicker, simpler to trace it. So I did trace it this week, and I've done several versions from my tracing. It's useful to have tracing paper. It's useful to have trace down tissue, which is something you can slip underneath the tracing, and then you just draw on top of your drawing and it comes down onto your paper. If you haven't got trace down tissue and you've got a soft chalky pastel, you can gently rub that on the back of the tracing paper, and then have your tracing paper the right side up, and then draw over the lines. It'll have exactly the same effect. It's like the old-fashioned carbon paper that some of you will be familiar with. So there are several ways of achieving a grid quickly without sort of measuring and drawing. And I deliberately made mine bigger because I wanted a slightly bigger image to work with for the benefit of this session. But obviously, tracing it off the original and doing it from the photocopy that you've got is a much more straightforward way of doing it. So,
I mean, for me, what I was trying to do was to find out what layers he had used. I was convinced that, obviously, as we all are, that it was a series of layers. It wasn't individual squares painted, individual rectangles painted. So I wanted to see what layers he had used. So I had no idea how many layers there were going to be, but I drew up 8 scaled down from the printout that Sue sent us. And so they were all sitting there on the page, and they are numbered top left 1, and then to the right 2, across to the right 3, across the right 4, bottom row 5, 6, 7, 8. So I started off with the rose color, the alizarin, where I thought he had put the first layer. And then I put that on every single one of the 8. Far too saturated, and so I tried to get some of it off. As you can see, there's a bit that's pale, and then I gave up on that, and I saw that my 8 were differently, they were carelessly done in the sense that they were differently saturated. Some were paler, some were darker. Anyway, I let that go, and then I took up color 2, which is the blue, and again, looking back at it, I can see that it's far too saturated. But I painted what I thought was the first blue layer in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and went away and had a cup of tea. and let them dry, and came back and saw that again, they were differently saturated. Number 2 is far too saturated. But anyway, like number 4 is about the right sort of paleness. Anyway, so that was that. So all 7 of them were like number 2. Then I took the yellow and decided where I thought the first yellow layer was and put that in, and it covered most of the thing, except that rectangle in the middle where there's the white, the pale blue, and the pale pink. So I did the rest of it yellow, pale yellow, and I thought the paleness was about right. And I did that in then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let that dry. Then I came back and started again with the red. And because the in the middle, in the lower right at the middle, those 2 L shapes are differently bright pink. And I thought that I'd get in the second layer of pink. So I put that in 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Let that dry. Then I did wait a minute, what's that say? It says yellow, blue. Oh, yes. So that was blue. Then down here, number 5, the second red layer in 5, 6, 7, 8. Then 6, the second yellow layer where I thought it should go, which was over most of it. But at each point, I had to decide where I thought the layer was. And that was just a matter of judgment. By this time, I realized that it was all getting too muddy, and that the tones, the saturation I had used wasn't watery enough, but it was too late. I couldn't get off one layer. So then I thought, okay, well, I'll carry on. And then the last 2, which somehow or other did seem to be enough, was another layer of blue, which you can see in the upside down L in the left-hand side, and a last layer of red in the bottom right, lower right. And I think I might have tarted up a bit of extra yellow as well, but informally, not in my layering system. And then that was it. I left it at that. And I didn't do it on watercolor paper. I did it in a sketchbook, which is very, very smooth, very white cartridge paper, which I knew wasn't appropriate for the watercolor, but that's why it's all a bit, it's not quite smooth enough. But anyway, I wanted it in that book. So that's what I did. And the main aim of it was to explore how he had divided up the layers. And so that was it. So I don't really regard any of them. I mean, I know the bottom right one is the final one, but it's way off his version.